I was on a 1-week jail sentence. Hey guys, this is Ollie with 10 Points to Ponder, where we like to talk about race, politics, Jesus, and manhood. Today, I want to talk about historical values. It's been a while since my last video. Part of that reason is because the video that I posted last time, I guess, did not meet the censors, and then I tried to repost it, which earned me a strike on YouTube, so I was on a 1-week jail sentence based on the last video. And rather than just give up on the topic altogether, I want to talk about the main points of the last video and try to do it in a way that I'm excluding maybe current events, because I want to leave it up to you guys to determine which aspect of the things that I'm talking about match what we're hearing currently. So the video thesis is that science itself is ever evolving. Once you get more evidence, then you are bound to change the way in which you treat or deal with anything related to science, right? We used to think that the earth was flat. We used to think that the sun revolved around the earth rather than the other way around. And so all these things are open to debate. But when we silence all debate or all alternative means and kind of give away all of our brains, give all of our allegiance and kind of blindly follow those who call themselves experts and who have, I think, a vested interest in maintaining their stance of expertise by not admitting when they're actually wrong, then we fail as a society and we end up with all sorts of atrocities, failures. We end up with a lot of problems and a lot of victims that are not victims of the actual malady, but are victims of the hubris of those who call themselves experts and are unwilling to admit when things change and they need to state that what they said earlier might not be correct. The reason that I speak in these terms is because I was recently blessed to get a copy of this book by Stephen Ambrose called Unaunted Courage. And it talks about Thomas Jefferson and Meriwether Lewis and the 1804 Lewis and Clark expedition. And one of the things that I gleaned from that book is the ever-evolving nature of science and our understanding of it, but also the transcendent nature of the core of human experience and what we all as a society should be striving for. And so in that book, Meriwether Lewis was traveling right through Indian territory. He's going up the Missouri River. His whole task and charge from Thomas Jefferson was to try to find an all-water route from the East Coast all the way to the Pacific Ocean. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to find an all-water route, but he found a route all the way down there. And he had to go through, he went through Montana, he went through Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and finally made his way all the way to the West Coast and ran into some Indian tribes. And so on this very dangerous journey, Lewis ended up having to serve as the doctor in that time. And in that time, very little was known about medicine. And so there were a couple of things that Lewis and frankly Clark himself did whenever they faced a disease or illness. Lewis had these pills, these thunderclapper pills that he would take for anytime there was malaria, anytime that his stomach was unsettled, anytime that there was anything wrong. That seemed to be just the prevailing response. Part of the reason I think that I went to YouTube jail is because I tried to relate it to today, but I'll leave that to you guys. There seems to be a one-size-fits-all sort of solution. The other thing that Lewis and Clark would resort to often is just bloodletting, just bleeding the person until they felt that person finally would be healed of their malady. And so many people actually suffered more from the bloodletting than from the disease taking its course, which again, I'll leave you guys to interpret that as you will. Ultimately, what I wanted to say in the video is that Lewis and Clark were able to endure significant hardships even at a time when the average age of death for people was 38 years old. You lived a very short life. You could always be cut short by, in their case, they ran into Indian tribes, they ran into bears, they ran into all sorts of, you could end up falling in a freezing stream and get pneumonia and get a fever and die. All sorts of things could happen, and yet they did it. Yet they endured all of these things because ultimately they understood that our lives are short. And there's a great scripture in which even Paul talks about the focus that he had to give the gospel, that he basically says that my life is worth nothing. I count it as nothing for me except that I use it for the sake of proclaiming the gospel. None of these things, these difficulties, these hardships that come before me, none of them move me except that I might proclaim the gospel. And that's what I saw, was that spirit of self-sacrifice and that spirit of focus not on oneself, but really upon bettering the human race. Upon sacrificing whatever was necessary to make sure that the most vulnerable among us had a chance to live and live in prosperity and had better lives than we, this generation, have. And again, I'll leave that to your interpretation in regards to current times. Are we living in such a way in which we're cherishing and really promoting the well-being and welfare of the future? Do we do maybe an injury? Are we really, should we be ashamed of ourselves that we're not adding to this great legacy that we've received as Americans, and making sure that those who are most vulnerable, our young people, are prized? Or are we more concerned about ourselves and basically sacrificing the futures of the young for our sakes? Because when I look at Lewis and Clark, when I look at those who dared greatly, those who traveled after Lewis and Clark in the late 1800s down that Oregon Trail. If you're my age, then you've played that game, Oregon Trail, and you could die at any moment. But they did it because they wanted to find a place, find a land for themselves, and they might not be the ones that ultimately cultivate it. They might not be the ones that do everything, but they wanted to do something and create some sort of foundation for their children. And are we doing that now in our society? So I think, hopefully, that this video is acceptable, because really all I'm talking about is historical perspective. Number one, that in history, there were things that were thought to be great science and cutting edge science that now we would look back on and say, wow, they were really flawed and primitive. And second, in history, they understood that their lives were short, and so they prized the young over the older generation. They wanted to make sure that they created a foundation for the younger generation. So that's all I have. Please like, comment, subscribe, share this video. My name's Ollie Schwaga, and this has been 10 Points to Ponder.